Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Voltron video. This is going to be my in-depth thoughts on Voltron Legendary Defender Season 8, the last season of Voltron. So previous videos I did my live reaction to the final episode, I discussed the season as I went through it. And then the most recent Voltron video I put out before this one was myself and Greg doing our podcast review for Season 8. And that discussion has definitely helped to inform and really get some more in-depth thoughts kind of going in my mind, and that's why I'm doing this video. So let's jump straight in with the first topic, which is the need to kill off Allura. And did they need to do that? Was it the right decision from a writing perspective, character perspective, and so on? The more and more I think about it, and I think the conclusion I came to on the podcast, and I still feel that way now after last night rewatching the finale, I don't think they need to do it. I think it was the wrong decision, and it's too, I think, negative. It's too sad of a moment. It's not, Allura is not the character to do the main character sacrifice with. I think her arc as a character of just, she loses, she's basically, it's just her and Karan, basically. Obviously, by the time of Season 8, we know there are other Alteans left, but still fundamentally, the whole theme this season especially of, I lost my family, I don't have any of my family members left, but I've managed to find a new family. The whole theme to me felt like you have to have her survive this series. You can't kill Allura off because that is it's too dark of a thought to really have. And so the fact that they did it, I don't think the positives of just how well done some of the goodbye scenes were, the tributes to her in the end were, I don't think they outweigh what you could have done if you had had her survive. Because, for one, Lance, looking back on it, I think Lance's epilogue stuff of just he becomes a farmer and spreads Allura's message just feels like, to me, that all I can think about with that is that the Allura decision might have been rushed in making, and that really affected the way they wanted to do an epilogue for Lance. So they just had to make one up on the fly. So the end for Lance feels kind of unsatisfying for me, and I think they would have been much better off just having a happy ending for Lance and Allura, completing the sort of thematic arc this season of the season starts with their first date. He says he loves her. He says he wants to be her family. She is happy to hear this. And especially with the whole idea of you basically have Allura versus Onnerva be a key aspect of this series. And Onnerva's motivations are also informed by family and stuff like that. She wants to get the joys of being with her husband and son. And obviously it doesn't work out for her and she ends up destroying things. So how fitting would it have been if in the end Onnerva is the one to sort of, maybe with the help of Allura, bring back the universes and give Allura that opportunity to have that, joyous time with her own family, to be Lance, and if they have children. That, to me, that's the way you do it. That's the way where you bring all of this full circle. That would have been, I think, much more impactful. And I wonder to a degree, was it because there was a sense of the writers being afraid of the sort of shipping community around Voltron and the fact that it tends to be fairly toxic, especially towards the creators, doesn't tend to be particularly great. I think, from what I saw at least, I thought there was much more people supportive of the Lance-Allura relationship than I expected. Of course, you still have shippers of other ships that were annoyed by it, but I would want to hope that the decisions like this were not made just to avoid, shipping issues within the fandom. I really hope that this was just, they felt this was the way to go, but I feel it will ultimately go down as, not the right decision. For all of those reasons. The other thing I want to bring up in all of this is the details behind explaining what Allura and Onnerva do to bring back the universes. To me, this is a straight up garbage explanation that they give here. They basically don't give you an explanation for what happens here. The exact line, it happens really, really suddenly as well. Rewatching it last night, it's amazing the shift that happens from just really nice end conversation of the Paladins on Onnerva. Onnerva is now they've turned her around, she's willing to help. And then Allura just immediately is this has to be goodbye. This is what we're going to do. Lotor taught me that we can transform like destructive energy into creative energy. And then what she says next, just to me, what does that mean? She says, like, I can, like, alter or transform the quintessence within your vessel. I'm like, what? Like, you're not talking about the entity there, because they seem to make the point that, like, quintessence isn't... The entity isn't quintessence, it just happens to be from the quintessence field. It is a form of energy, but they never really said it was quintessence. So, you know, the entity, I think, gave you that sort of unique aspect to kind of focus on as, like, a way to end it, but they never confirmed that that's the case or not. So they seem to just be like, oh, we're both powerful Alteans strong with energy and quintessence. We'll just use that and turn it into a creative thing. And somehow that means they're basically gods and can just recreate whole universes, including altering the universe with something that, like, wasn't present anymore in regards to, like, bringing back Altea and Dibazol. You know, that's fine, I think. It's just, I don't think you needed to kill off Allura to do that. You could have had Allura, like, transfer her power to Onerva to allow her to do it. And again, because of Onerva, I think Onerva at that point in time would have wanted that as well. I think the idea that, like, both characters die to make this happen, I don't think it is overly fitting. I think Allura surviving is what needed to happen. So I can still accept what happened. Like, I'm not, like, really annoyed about the way it happened. I just think it would have been so much better if they'd made the other decision. The way I interpret it is that, like, to me, them killing off Allura would have been the same if, like, say in Avatar The Last Airbender, Aang had to sacrifice himself to defeat Ozai. That's too tragic of an ending, and I think most people would agree with that for Avatar. And it's the same thing here, in that, like, Allura is actually a very kind of similar type of position as Aang, of, like, Aang is allowed to have his happy ending of, like, starting a family with Katara eventually. He, you know, doesn't have his people, but, you know, eventually they get to the point of, like, the Airbenders coming back. It's very similar with Allura and the Alteans, but they go in the other direction, and I don't think it has the impact it should have. And for one, it's like Allura doesn't get her happy ending, but also it means Lance doesn't get his happy ending. And let's talk about that as well. Again, a lack of detail. What's up with the Altean markings things? Like, I've seen some people interpret this as like, oh, Allura turns Lance into an Altean. And I'm like, I really don't think that that's the case. For one, I'd question a little bit. Ultimately, yeah, she recreated the whole world, but I'd be shocked if she just transformed the species that he was. I don't think Lance would want to suddenly become an Altean. My interpretation initially was that it was about sort of the mark of the chosen type thing of, part of it, you know, just, you know, symbol to remember her by, as well as sort of being, you know, her, Lance was the person she chose. But they didn't do it, they didn't explain it at all. So it ended up just being this visual thing of just like, yeah, we did it. Great. It's just that to me is where this show has always struggled with a little bit. Like, when it comes to, like, resolving some of these plot points, like, they always are a little bit, like, vague on the detail front. The marking thing doesn't matter to me as much as, I suppose, the details around what they did to end the universe and why Allura needed to be included as much as she did in that. And then let's get back to the entity as well. Why wasn't that mentioned at all during that sequence? That was your get out of jail free card in the middle of all of this. All you had to say was that Allura, having the entity within her, now realizes that she, because of what she learned in Oriande, because of advice from Lotor, is able to transform the entity into a constructive, a force that creates. That's all you needed to do. And you have Onerva there as the person who has, like, the entire entity within her. And that's a way to do it. Immediately. Like, but they don't do that. They drop the whole plot point of the entity after they use it to get into Onerva's mind, and then it's just not present anymore. And they never resolve it within that episode. It's just gone. So that's where I stand on the Allura thing at this point in time. I don't hate the way they did it, but I think it would have been so much better to do it the other way. And for a character I really enjoyed and thought was very well developed over the course of the series. You, I think, fumbled pretty badly on the last hurdle with this one. So, let's move on to Lotor. So, with Lotor, I thought it was interesting in that I have, I suppose, a more minor negative, but an overall positive when it comes to Lotor this season. The negative would be, again, super vagueness around finally confirming just 100% to us as the audience. Lotor is dead. They haven't brought Lotor back. He is dead. I was amazed rewatching this again how unclear it is. The amount of characters who mention Lotor this season in different ways is kind of pretty shocking. I think most of the paladins at some point mention the fact that, in the aftermath of I think it's episode 6 when the ritual happens, the mech is back. Most of them feel that Lotor is back. Most of the Alteans who are working for Onerva at the time are like, we want to get our savior back. We'll do everything we can to do that. As if Onerva had told them that they can get Lotor back. And I think it takes until basically episode 10 to get the final confirmation that Lotor's dead. Because it's only that moment where they go into Onerva's memory and they see her looking into the cockpit of the Syncline mech. And you see an unresponsive Lotor there, kind of covered in vines as if he's fused to the mech. That's the confirmation that he is gone. And that's what fully establishes that that's why her goal is to be in a universe where she can be with Lotor and Zarkon, because in this one, both of them are gone. I was just really shocked at how unclear they were about that. Multiple characters mentioning, Onerva sort of hinting that he's dead, but then her saying stuff to other characters that makes it seem like there's hope that he's still alive. And especially when they brought back the mech, and it was moving on its own, and they never cut into the cockpit to show you Lotor. That was really all over the place, because she even has a line of dialogue to Allura where she's like, only I can hold him back, as if Lotor, that she has control over Lotor piloting that mech, when in reality it's is she remote piloting it somehow? Very unclear. The positive with Lotor, I think, is actually that retroactively through episode 2 and a couple of other moments in this season, they give Lotor some actually really good development, because Hagar's backstory episode of the episode 2, I think it's called Shadows or something like that, or In Shadows, that really to me helped to give Lotor a lot of development that helped me to, I suppose, more accept his, to me, sudden turn back in season 6, where he kind of goes all crazy. This explanation here makes so much sense, and it's great character setup for Onerva as well, because just seeing those moments, especially that moment where they show us the moment of Lotor on the planet where he worked with the people to make it the most efficient in the Galra Empire. He talked about this to Allura back in those seasons. Here we get to see the effect it had on him. Because again, we almost forget now because we're a few seasons removed from it, but we went back and forth with Lotor about he seems overall like he's going to be this positive person for the Empire, but he lost it right at the end. And here you see that he wants to work with him, he wants to make the galaxy a better place, but it's these moments along the way he was treated by his father, the not having Onerva around because she was Hagar at that point in time, and she just kind of watched on, kind of assisted in gradually morphing him from being sort of idealistic into having, I think, far too much of the kind of toxic Galra mindset. It really did in the end affect him, and he was unable to remove himself from that. And that's what they make clear at the end, when Onerva sees, I suppose, Allura's memories of Lotor. She's like, you helped him. He was this close to, really turning things around, but he was too far gone because of Zarkon, because of, from Onerva's perspective, because of me. And I like that. You feel for Lotor because of these scenes, him asking about who is my mother. I want to know where I came from, and Zarkon's just no. And you see the bad aspects begin to come in. Like even the scene with Kova where like Zarkon obviously uses his power as Emperor and is just like, no, you're not coming with me. And then immediately Lotor, pulls rank on Nerva, Hagar, to take Kova as his own. And you see these kind of negative things coming in of like, he's being influenced by Zarkon to kind of have these kind of poor traits of like, that's sort of the typical villainous leader thing of like they use their power to exert it over other people. Whereas like Allura doesn't do that with people, even though she's the princess, and so on. So I really liked what they did here with just a couple of little flashback scenes and like references back to Lotor. And then similarly, that I think leads into just how well done Nerva's arc over the course of this season was. They brought her arc, her fascinating arc, full circle here in a really, really great way. The motivations of just her, in the end, wanting to find a reality where she could have the joys of her family, basically, be with Lotor, be with Zarkon, and it just, be happy. That's all she wanted. But it's the lengths to which she was willing to go to get that. And it's the tragedy of if she didn't lose herself to the quintessence in the first place, if she didn't pursue that science so hard, she would have had that in the first place. She was pregnant at the time, was really happy, Zarkon was there. If they had just stopped that research for a little bit, pulled back a little bit and not pushed it so hard, she would have had ultimately the situation she wanted in the end. And I think that's the core tragic moment in all of this, is in that the entity is at the same time this thing that gave her power, but it's also the thing that ultimately like ruined the happiness she could have had. And I just really liked it that the motivation was just a mother wanting to be with her family, and I thought that was it was something that was kind of like easy to connect to, but was very powerful at the same time. And as much as they didn't make the connection right at the end, I like that it's at least kind of present there with just the connection between like Allura and Nerva, of just Allura is kind of on the path to having her own happy family, and Nerva has kind of lost hers. That's why I felt like they really should have gone in a different direction with the decision about Allura. But yeah, especially the Nights of Light 2 party where we went into her memories and we saw all those happy moments. We saw her how closely she guarded some of those really key moments of just, the defining traits of her are like her inquisitiveness, how much she loves the world and wants to learn about the mysteries of the world. And I like that was brought up right at the end. That was kind of like the turning moment of like, before you even had your family, like you had this driving force within you that, you can still be happy without your family because you had this, adventurous aspect to yourself of you wanted to help people. You wanted to use science and discover the mysteries of the world to help people. Like it wasn't all about your family. You had something. You weren't just nothing without them. And I just thought that was great. And that helps to, again, retroactively see like, there's the aspects of Lotor that he got from his mother as well, that they're present in him as well. And especially like towards the end, like mentioning Lotor, that she sees how Allura came this close to kind of bringing Lotor back around, and that's really the turning point for her, that when it's pointed out to her that Lotor, the person you've in a way been inspired to do all of this bad stuff for, he was the one in the first place who cared about life, kind of brought the Alteans back, did some terrible things in the aftermath of that, but brought these people back. I loved what they did there for the most part, and I think Nerva as a character comes to an end in a really nice way. It's just unfortunate that like to kind of complete Nerva's arc, they sort of sacrificed Allura into that as well, and sort of I think messed up her ending, whereas I felt it would have been better to have Nerva take the entire sacrifice on herself and allow Allura to have the happy ending that she couldn't. It's unfortunate that's what they did, but it is what it is. Into another, I suppose, more mixed bag thing. I think the more I watch it, the more I feel a little bit unsatisfied by the way they did some of the epilogue stuff. Now, a lot of it will come down to the fact that I think they didn't commit to any of the relationship stuff. They didn't really show any of it. I think the most egregious example of this is Hunk and Shay. When we get Hunk's thing of like he created a culinary empire, Shay is nowhere to be seen in that image, despite her being in the previous scene with Hunk, where he's acting as like a diplomat, and he reveals his whole intergalactic kitchen basically, and it was just like I felt like that was a relationship that you would set up immediately earlier on, and now because she's not in that scene, and they're not confirming if they're in a relationship, it's like, whereas was I even meant to interpret that as being a romantic thing? But then, like, I look back and like, no. Hunk has a big reaction when Shay is the one to bring all the Balmeras into play. So they're still setting that up, but why isn't she there? Similarly, like Keith and Oxia, like I appreciate that they're at the very least in the same epilogue moment that they show, but again, they don't really confirm the relationship dynamic. I'm a bit more accepting of that because I like the idea that Keith is the one to sort of transition the Blades from being a kind of warrior kind of faction into being a humanitarian organization. And I like that Oxia, Zethrid, and Ezor all join him, that they join the Blades. That feels very like a Ty Lee joins the Kyoshi Warriors type thing to me. And I think it's a good move because it at the very least still leaves the door open where like Oxia is always around Keith. That relationship could actually happen. So there's that. But as I said, like the Lance one, to me feels just very unsatisfying. Like, okay, he lives a kind of quiet life as a farmer. That's fine. But like spreading Allura's message, what exactly does that mean? He just sort of has this kind of quiet, like melancholy, reflecting on Allura for the rest of his life. That's not a great ending for like a character who became like the development for Lance over the last like 4 or 5 seasons. I thought was so well done, and to just give him a bit of a just sad ending, I just wasn't very satisfied with it at all. Paige like didn't really have any romance set up, so it was kind of fitting that like okay, the whole family just is overall in general a big part of stuff going forward in terms of like Earth as like a central part of the galaxy at this point. That was nice. Shiro's ending is an interesting one because I think I said this in my live reaction as well. Just like my initial reaction was like, okay, look, I don't have any problem with that inherently, but if this was your plan from the get-go to have Shiro get married at the end to a character we didn't really know all that much, for anyone wondering, the guy's name is Curtis. You actually see him for most of the season. He's on the Atlas. He's like the comms tech on the Atlas. He's like right there. He talks to Shiro a couple of times, but it's mainly as like just, he's the commanding officer. He asks someone to do something. They say like, yes, sir. They give their report. There's no real personal interaction between the two of them. So it's not that he's just a complete nobody, but there's no personal connection made between the two of them. So I completely get the idea of like, if you set up Adam in like the previous season, it was only a season ago, like the timing I think is such to where there's no way that this was just a reaction. There's no way season 8 was just a reaction to people being annoyed at what happened to Adam in season 7. I don't think there was anywhere near enough time for them to just potentially redo Shiro's ending to have him, be in a relationship with someone else at the end. I think ultimately what they probably should have done is found some way to just bring Adam back, or just not kill Adam in the first place. Like he has to, maybe like Shiro has to leave Adam behind on the planet, and maybe they leave on bad terms, but he comes back and it's all fixed. It just is an example of like, it's another kind of like Allura, another character who like did you really need to kill them off given where you were going? It's a little bit of a lack of foresight on the writing department. It's still a nice scene. It is like positive representation as much as you can maybe think it's thrown in, but that's what it is. The fact that again, the final moment before you get into the like full on yeah, like the final moment of the show basically is that kiss. Like, of course, afterwards they have the brief scene with the lions and the constellation, but that's it. So I'd say it's like a minor, just like lack of thought with the writing department. Now, it's not a negative thing as such. It's just plan it out a little bit better. And then we get into the lines of what they did with the lines at the end. I'm not the biggest fan of them just having the lines go off and then the characters explain it away as if like, oh, everyone knows. The lines aren't needed anymore. We're in an era of peace. And I think, again, similar to the Allura Lance stuff, I think it would have been so much more fitting to just have the lines remain around, but the paladins move on. Like, create a new generation of paladins. Have our characters, fit into their roles. Keith goes with the blades, in my perfect, I suppose, ending, Lance and Allura would like have a happy family together, and so on. They go down more or less the same paths that they show us them doing. It's just the lines are still active. It's just different people in them, and I think that would have been more fitting in terms of a generational thing. You showed us the original paladins. Here's the current generation of paladins. Who's next? And I think that fits the show a little bit better. I'm not sure how I feel about the lines just randomly going off on their own when they've always been like piloted before. Like, what are we meant to really interpret from the fact that in the aftermath of all of this, the Lions just suddenly on their own decide that, oh yeah, we just want to leave. There's something that just feels like unexplained about that, because they never went into an incredible amount of depth about like what exactly the sentience of the Lions means as such. So them leaving is a bit unsatisfying. In terms of some final other scattered moments throughout the season, I like that they gave time to resolve some of the unresolved plot points of like Ronveg's super weapon. As much as it really didn't amount to much, they just blew up the ship that he was on and that got rid of that monster. I still like that they brought it up. It created an interesting plot point to allow that Galra General Guy Lon to kind of trust the team. And sort of connected a couple of dots from like earlier seasons, and it was fairly well done. On a similar note, I like that they gave kind of Oxia, Zethrid, and Ezor a little bit of a focus in, I think, what was that, episode 5 perhaps? Either way, it was the episode that they were in, and they got a bit of focus of just addressing the fact that as kind of half-breeds, they had a certain amount of anger and rage because of the way they were treated by the Galra Empire, and then the way they were treated by Lotor. Oxia has managed to get past that. Ezor managed to get past that, but Zethrid didn't. And I like that they brought back the fact that they were this group. They were actually all friends. We're all close. And they all helped to sort of, support each other in the aftermath of this. And, they I suppose in the end, like, Zethrid and Ezor end up helping the group in that, like, they break into the bridge, they bring the Alkari tech in, and stuff happens. So I thought that was, well done. The destruction of Alkarian, again, I thought that was well done. It gave Paige a nice moment to kind of connect to the planet, show that connection. And an especially good moment from this season was the Knights of Light two-parter. I loved getting to see the original Paladins again. I loved the little speeches that each of the original Paladins gave to the new generation. Of like, what's his name? Grygal talked to Hunk and talked about like unity and so on. Alfor and Lance had a nice conversation of just acknowledging, as two people who both love Allura, and how he's happy that, Allura's chosen someone like Lance. Similarly, the previous Green Paladin talking to Paige about how, like, just, your the strength and the size of your, like, inquisitive mind completely outweighs, like, your stature. The Green Lion has found, like, the perfect Paladin. And then I actually really liked Blate's and Allura's conversation of just, I was always someone who was very different, and Blue helped to bring out the kind of greatness that was within me that I didn't even know about. You are a great person, Allura, and the Blue has helped bring that out of you. And, addressing the fact of, like, you're similar to your father in so many ways, but different as well. And that's why Blue was the perfect line for you. I thought they really, got onto something there. And then later on with Zarkon, I like that Zarkon acknowledged in a way that, like, Keith, you're a really good leader. and because they were developing Zarkon there, I like that they addressed like the fact that Keith has developed into this really strong leader, and it shows maybe some of the weaknesses of Zarkon as a leader here. The weaknesses that in a way allowed him to fall in the way that he did. So that was interesting, and just showing you like the moment of how the original Paladins were killed, that it was Onnerva who did it. That sacrifice, that connective dots were really well done. Allura, giving Zarkon all those memories back, and him finally, I suppose, siding with the team to do good in the aftermath of all of that, I thought was really, really, really well done. Very emotional, but very fitting for what was going on. I think I'd be a little bit critical of like, I think there were a few too many episodes this season that felt a little like fillery. Like in previous seasons, we'd always had like our Voltron show episode, our intergalactic game show episode. In this season, I felt like, okay, they had the Clear Day episode, but Clear Day at least was half the Allura, really interesting. Will she not accept the entity within her? But the episode before that was the like vlogging episode with like Kincaid, and that was also kind of more fillery fun. And it just, I think, amounted to the fact that, like, I think over the course of about 3 or 4 of the episodes of this season, it felt like, this is the final season, do you really need to do this many kind of just oddball episodes doing all this stuff? That's just what I'd be a little critical of in terms of some of the stuff wasn't fleshed out in the way that I maybe wanted to be. But still, overall, I liked what they did for most of this season. But there were mistakes. And I think that's where I've settled into with the end of the show. I will still maintain that Voltron is a really, really strong show. Just the fact that you can say that this team created a Voltron show with this level of depth is always going to be a positive that this show will have. In that I never really thought that Voltron had this level of depth, and them doing it in the Avatar and Korra style of being very character driven worked so well, to the point where what you'd maybe usually associate as being like the strength of a show like this with a mech would be the fighting, the action. In this show, actually, most of the action was probably borderline one of the weaker aspects, because one final criticism would be that how repetitive did so many of these fights get? How many times over the course of this season, but then keeping into account all the other seasons, has Voltron been like taken out temporarily by having their energy drained? It happened at least 3 times this season, twice in the finale. And the pacing of the final fight, I thought, was just all over the place. It really prevented the final fight for me from being very interesting. Super Voltron, when they combined with the Atlas, was immediately defeated. Like the huge, all the Balmera, the convulgence or whatever they called it, comes together. They fuse the Voltron and Atlas together. They go through the portal and are immediately taken out. Like, they get to use their sword for like a little bit, but then boom, they're taken out, drained of energy. Keith gives a speech, they get back up, they go back in, are drained of energy again. A little bit more of the fight happens, and then the final power-up is this comically huge booster rocket that they use to end the fight by basically just pushing Onnerva into like the beginning of the universe. It's just like, wasn't much of a fight. And then a lot of the Robeast fights I thought were very samey. I think we're lacking a little bit of choreography, and then I think it's just a little bit of everything just feeling a bit same after so many seasons of seeing somewhat similar fights. There was only so much that they could do. That's something I think if I ever rewatch it to kind of look out for. Like, what were the fights where the action, the choreography felt really, really good. But yeah, like I said, I still really enjoy the season despite some of the mistakes that were made. I think initially I sort of settled on like maybe 8 out of 10 for the show, I think, in my initial reaction. I think I'd probably lean towards more, at this point, like a 7 maybe as where I kind of land on the season, to where there were a couple of big enough like mistakes in my mind, unsatisfying moments, where it brings the show down like a decent bit. It keeps it out of that like really good, excellent tier, but the quality is still there for the most part. The overall show, is it brought up? I'm not sure. Like I think I probably would settle at right now. I'd lean towards maybe the entire show is perhaps like an 8, but this season was a 7 or something like that. But yeah, that's my thoughts for now. You'll see other Voltron videos from me down the road. I do need to rewatch the series again, but once I do, you'll probably see at least a kind of Voltron in review type video where I discuss the entire series, and then maybe a like top 5 episodes list and a like bottom 5 episode list in terms of like the worst episodes. But I don't expect any of those until like sometime in the new year. I don't think there's enough time left in this year with all the other stuff I need to do to also rewatch the entire series of Voltron again. So that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.